Now, the AP Top 25, this will be the last AP Top 25 that is not influenced by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. As I've detailed on CBSSports.com and elsewhere, they do take a very interesting relationship with one another. Playoff Committee either deciding to follow or divert from what the AP Top 25 releases on Sunday when they release on Tuesday night. And then with the Tuesday night rankings and a new set of results, sometimes some reaction from the AP voters as well. We can't help it. We're all human. It's imperfect. That's what makes it beautiful. So I'll start right at the top. Do you think that Ohio State, which in voting points was very, very close to the number one spot, 1,530 for Georgia, 1,513 for Ohio State. However, the first place vote's a little bit more divisive. 31 for Georgia, 18 for Ohio State, 13 for Tennessee. After Ohio State's win at Penn State, do you think the Buckeyes can get number one?
I do. Yeah, because I think there are some voters who might switch from Georgia to Tennessee with their number one overall vote. And my thought is generally like the people voting for Georgia as number one are probably in the Southeast, and they probably might have a little more Tennessee bias to them as well. It's just totally just flying by the seat of my pants theory. I did not look this up. So if I'm wrong, if Georgia has a big like West Coast contingent of voters, then this theory is totally bunk. But my thought is like if a couple votes shift from Georgia to Tennessee, you might have Ohio State 1, Georgia 2, Tennessee 3.
Yeah, I think there's a decent chance because there are going to be people out there like Chip Patterson who hate Georgia and think Georgia wasn't very impressive today.
I thought they were fine. I thought they were okay.
They were okay.
They were good. They were good. They were appropriate. They were dress code. You know what? Listen, yeah, Georgia, you know what Georgia was? Georgia was appropriately dressed. Georgia was not stunning. Georgia wore exactly what it needed to wear to get into the grill room on a Wednesday night. They put on a blazer if you need a blazer at your grill room. They had a collared shirt tucked in if you need a collared shirt tucked in at your grill room. They were, in a very Georgia fashion, appropriately dressed.
Yeah, no, I think that Ohio State will probably get more first place votes than they already had because beating Penn State is like Tennessee killed Kentucky, and that's killing a team that's ranked is still big, but I don't know how much respect there really is for Kentucky compared to Penn State. So doing it on the road might get them a few more first place votes. And I do think Georgia will suffer from a game in which people will be like, they didn't win by as much as they're supposed to. So yeah, I think it's in the cards. I don't know if I agree with it. They should be number one because like this is the second week in a row where they've won, but they haven't really looked to be at peak Ohio State while doing it.
My projection on CBSSports.com is Georgia will retain number one. It was my theory going into the night slate was if Tennessee lost or faltered at all, then I'm with you, Bud, generally. But I thought that maybe if those votes were up for grabs and you were trying to decide between Georgia and Ohio State where you were going to go with it, that Ohio State might have gotten a little bit of a nod there. But I think that it is the most interesting storyline heading into the AP Top 25 release, whether or not Georgia will be surpassed by Ohio State. Now, also, the biggest – go ahead.
I was going to say, if you go resume-based, like Tennessee's got the best win. Georgia's got the second best win. Because beating Oregon right now by 46 is a better win than Ohio State beating Penn State.
I would agree with that. Neutral site. I mean, Tom Fornelli himself said that season openers, you know.
I'm saying I think that people put too much stock in them, but that's not going to stop them from putting too much stock in them.
I think that Tennessee might come out as the number one team in the college football playoff rankings.
That
seems like something that the selection committee would do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they'll have Clemson like lower than people realize, and they'll try to create this narrative drama about how will Clemson get left out if they go undefeated? No, but like we'll move them up at the end because it's conference championship, all that kind of stuff, right? It's just I can see Tennessee being number one to start this thing.
What about biggest riser in the college football playoff ranking? I've got Kansas State. I think that this is going to be a team that even though they've got 2 losses on the season, if AP voters decide to act like a college football playoff selection committee and take injuries into consideration, then you've got a 2-loss team where one of them was against an undefeated TCU team. I've got Kansas State checking in at number 11. And again, UCLA is still in action. So that could change, but right now just outside the top 10.
Let me ask you this. Is Ole Miss back in the top 10?
No, they're at 12.
So you've got Kansas State coming in ahead of Ole Miss?
Jumping Ole Miss.
I don't think that's going to happen. But I was surprised by the way they've treated Ole Miss in the ballot last week, so I could be wrong.
What about North Carolina, Chip? Like they could make a huge jump. They really throttled Pitt tonight, and the rest of their schedule looks a little bit better after today. I'm thinking they could be all right.
21-17 is my projection for North Carolina's jump. I think that they run into this roadblock of like Penn State, Utah, LSU. Where is a voter going to put North Carolina ahead of those teams? And I think that becomes a little bit difficult given that the Tar Heels still have to play Wake Forest, still have to play NC State. Some of the tougher opponents on that schedule are still there. And while the Notre Dame win, which by the way, if you want to find one 3-loss team that might be in the top 25 on Sunday, it might be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
I would go Texas over Notre Dame as the most.
Yeah. So Notre Dame lost at home to Stanford, which is down 24-6 at the half, and did not even have 100 yards yet in this ball game. And they lost at home to Marshall, who today lost at home to Coastal. So I do, sprinkles. I do think that Notre Dame's losses continue to look a lot worse. And if voters actually paid attention to that game, they will know that Schrader got knocked out, the quarterback for Cuse. They probably did not pay attention.
That's a big conditional to throw in there.
Well, we got to pay attention. What the hell is this?
But isn't 11 points the closest margin that Ohio State's had all season? And you've also got wins against Syracuse and North Carolina. Like the Notre Dame profile will be weighed down by those awful losses that you mentioned. I was just saying, just keep an eye on the Fighting Irish. Teams that I think are going to drop out: Kentucky out, Cincinnati out, South Carolina out. Is it Liberty's time? Are we ringing that bell? They were off.
I think they
7-1, and they were right on the edge last week.
I think they get in, but man, like who have they played?
Wake Forest with a 1-point loss to the Demon Deacons, a quality loss to Wake Forest is the claim to success.
Yeah, no, I think they'll get in because they are 7-1 or 8-1 or whatever they are now. But they will be the new South Carolina of the AP top 25.
UCF was on the very edge of breaking in, and then they went and lost 34-13 to ECU. By beating Cincinnati, though it was at home. I think that the Knights are a good candidate to potentially show up as well. But all this churn and turnover and the type of teams that we're talking about at the edge is why I think that Syracuse might not fall out.
I don't think it should. I mean, if it's 6-2 and its losses are to Clemson and Notre Dame,
we just talked last week about how sequencing seems to matter in this thing, right? If you win all these games in a row or you lose all these games in a row, as opposed to ping pong, and you get more rewarded or more punished.
So they've got to win against NC State, and NC State, which if you talked to me on Thursday night, I was like, I know they won, but they might fall out of this. But then you start comparing them, and you're like, all right,
I don't remember.
NC State against Oregon State. Okay, NC State against Mississippi State. And all of a sudden, this NC State team, which has defeats to Clemson and Syracuse, and now has a third-string quarterback who led a 3-touchdown comeback win.
Looks pretty good, by the way.
And looks pretty good. Shout out to MJ Morris for leading that comeback for the Wolfpack. Yeah, I think NC State is still there. And so Syracuse's win against NC State's now quality. It is a mess. I've got Oklahoma State's drop, as they are now 6-2. They've got wins against Texas, Baylor, and Texas Tech. But, now we've got a couple losses here. I've got the Cowboys falling down to number 18 from number 9.
Is there any chance they can just drop all the way out since they lost 48-0?
No.
I thought about them penalizing the like margin, but again, like the teams that we're talking about at the end of this ballot, it's going to be really tough for a voter to look at a 6-2 squad with the wins that it has and be like, no, for sure, this other team's better.
All right, who has better wins, the Noles or Oklahoma State?
Who has more losses? The Noles or Oklahoma State?
I think Oak State is too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't listen. They're not going to drop out because they got killed. That you don't go from the top 10 to unranked with one loss.
I forgot they were top 10.
Yeah.
That was very legit.
I think speaking of the top 10, how many voters have the courage to put Illinois in their top 10?
We'll find out. I've got them at 13.
Wow, you're a hater.
Should they be top 10? Or if they were not named Illinois and they went in the top 10, would we be like, hey, this team, this is the one this week?
All I'm saying is, like, if you look at their defensive numbers and then you look at strength of schedule, according to FPI, the Illinois strength of schedule is pretty much the same as Georgia's. Illinois has better defensive numbers, and Georgia gets all the credit in the world because their defense is filled with guys who had high recruiting rankings, whereas Illinois is playing better, but they don't have a bunch of 5-stars. So it's just, well, they haven't played anybody. And we'll see what Georgia does against Tennessee next week.
Okay, so is it possible that Nebraska was one of the 3 best wins of the season? Or you just go Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin. Those are the 3 best wins.
I think, see, Nebraska today, like, to be clear, Nebraska, like, Casey Thompson went out with an injury late in the first half, and once he was gone, I mean, Nebraska's offense didn't do anything. I don't think it really impacted what the final score would have been, but Nebraska's offense was just from that point on. But I would say the 3 best wins are, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota.
Yeah. I mean, I've got Illinois ahead of North Carolina, both 1-loss teams, both sort of lacking in that like really awesome win that you can hang your hat on. That's I think that's the thing that's holding Illinois back, though their defensive statistical prowess, as you mentioned, they are one of the best defenses in the entire country.
I will say the other stat from FPI that they have is the average win probability for the teams in the country and all their games combined. Illinois ranks 6th.
Damn.
Yep. They're just beating the hell out of everybody they play, but nobody cares.
We will find out where Illinois lands. We will find out if there's a change over at number 1 and who might pop in near the edge of the rankings, where, again, we are projecting there to be a lot of turnover. Be sure to check out cbssports.com for an article called Tomorrow's Top 25 Today. And, of course, check out the new AP Top 25, which will be released on Sunday.